up, Dave. Cuts through the noise, makes it plain. Talking headlines, cracking jokes, saying names. Hey! Straight up, Dave. Got the facts and the laughs on the way. Woo! Politics, real talk, every day. Straight up, Dave. Say it how it is. Big opinions, big laughs, that's the biz. From the right side, guest in the chair. If you want it unfiltered, Dave's already there. Straight up, Dave.
Thank you for checking out Straight Up Dave. You know, today we need to kind of reveal a couple of things going on. This is not the only platform. Now, we appreciate you checking here on YouTube or the streaming service that you found it, but we also have a site on Substack. Now, that is called Straight Up as well. And today we had a story with Mark Tedford. Mark is running for the 1st District congressional seat in Tulsa. And what's interesting, while he is a conservative, he asserts that engaging incrementalist policy is not a compromise on principle. That's something conservatives have dealt with for a little while. Do we go for everything we want? Or do we are we satisfied just moving the ball forward a little bit? Maybe not all at once, but incrementally. It's an interesting story and an interesting perspective that I invite you to check out on Straight Up on Substack. Now, you can find that probably easiest by just typing arnett.substack.com. On Tulsa Today, that's the original platform that we went with online in 1996. Living proof I probably should get a 12-step recovery program to exit journalism. But it is an interesting field, and Tulsa Today has fought a lot of issues and regular news, coverage of a lot of important events. Now, we've specialized in education in many ways. And there is an educational piece today out by one of our writers, Ken Malloy. And Ken wrote an article Monday that talked about how Oklahoma has 2 different education systems. One is the talk of the nation, and one is the disgrace of our people. Now, he doesn't use those words, but he wonders, how can we have a vo-tech system that is absolutely a national model of excellence, and yet we have a K-12 system that is humiliating for the people who live here, that is actually the city of Tulsa and actually Oklahoma City are dragging down the entire state's education numbers because they have turned into inner city districts, and yet they still operate as though they're universal districts. So anyway, he wrote about that on Monday, and today on TulsaToday.com, he considers the issue of correcting an entire system in Oklahoma, and that, he asserts, has been done before. So check that out. It's TulsaToday.com. But the really interesting thing is that I want to talk to you about today is our daily newspaper in this city has gone through a lot of changes, and none of them good. There have been massive layoffs. The paper itself is shrinking, but there's hope. There is hope with a new executive editor. Now, in a story, let's see, this is May 2nd, so apparently right after celebrating May Day with other communists, she decided to opine on her vision for the Tulsa World. An executive editor took the role in February. Her name is Kristen Wright. And I hope she gets it right. I hope she can. However, after reading the piece, I'm not sure she really understands her situation. Because the Tulsa World, well, let me step back. First of all, she says that the newspaper will no longer carry endorsements for political candidates. I celebrate that. I will probably do some endorsements this cycle, but it's always difficult because you never know if those candidates, as well as you get to know them, whether they will actually do in office what they promise on campaigns. But it will be good for the Tulsa World to focus more on just the facts, ma'am, as we tend to do here, than opining continuously. But that doesn't really fix their problem. The problem with the Tulsa World is they are infected with woke ideology. They are the wokenistas of Oklahoma because while a lot of older people just cherish the newspaper, it is shrinking. It is less and less news, less and less coverage because they have less and less reporters to actually cover the news. Now, she has also said, Christine Wright, the new executive editor of the Tulsa World, that she's very proud of her 12 years with Penwell. And she quotes one of the owners, Bob, who talked about that you go digital or you die. And that's her plan for the Tulsa World, to go digital. Well, there's a couple of things to that I would suggest. First of all, they stop the hideous pop-ups, pop-overs, or pop-arounds that make it so difficult a reader can't actually read the story without continually adjusting or trying to read it on their screen. It is terrible. Now, maybe I guess you can pay more money and get less ads, but it's very distracting. The other thing is, it's not just digital that will be the new success. And in fact, nobody really knows what media is going to be adapted as the dominant media, because we know legacy media has failed nationally and locally. It has failed utterly. And it is because the ideology of legacy media is almost exclusively leftist. Now, the exception is Fox News, which the left, of course, demonize, but the left demonizes anybody. The left loved our Mitt Romney until he ran for office, and then all of a sudden he was bad. You know, other presidents the same way. John McCain was a favorite of the media until he announced for president, and then they spent months demonizing, as they are demonizing Trump. And the more they demonize a Republican, the more you know that Republican is on track doing a good job. And that's happening locally in the media in Tulsa. Now, if you're going to just go digital, if that's the only avenue, the Tulsa World is going to be a failure. And in fact, if she's looking to Penwell, I would remind her that Penwell is no longer there. And I know why. Actually, I was with them. Because before she joined Penwell in 2003, I was there in 2000. And yeah, 99, 2000. Um, I was the first editor at Penwell to publish daily. Now, Penwell was a great publication. It was an icon in Tulsa. They had so many industry magazines. They specialized in industry efforts, covering the dental industry, or their most famous was the Oil and Gas Journal, which was a weekly publication. But they had multitudes. Now, for them, I was doing the water and wastewater book called Water World. And we started publishing daily, and it was successful. And we sold ads, and it was prosperous. And that inspired the owners of the company, Bob and others, to try and gather all Penwell's digital resources together. They had hoped to roll it out as an IPO, as a separate company, PenNet. Um, I tried to tell them they were spending too much money on that. And some people back in the day still remember me for being one, if not the only one, that was saying they're not, that the revenues are not going to justify the money they were spending to do that. Now, they never rolled out the IPO. And as most Tulsans know, Penwell is no longer here. If they survive under another name or another form, I don't know, but it's a great loss to Tulsa. They were magazine publishers, they were book publishers, but they also put on some tremendous trade shows, Power Gen, for example, and other kinds of things that are no longer here. And yet, Penwell's approach to do print, to do digital, to do events as well, that was really the best thing they could do. Focusing exclusively on digital doesn't really have the same magic. But I don't know. Digital or die. Maybe they are dying. Now, in this same story, Ms. Wright talks about they're no longer an AP newspaper. They are no longer associated with the Associated Press. Now, that is the standard in media. And as a managing editor for the City News Organization, I worked with the AP, and I agree they're probably not as good as they think they are in producing content, but they sure do have a lot of it from a lot of different sources. From now on, the Tulsa World, our daily newspaper here in Tulsa, is going to welcome national news from Reuters and USA Today. That's kind of like the People magazine's reflection of news, very superficial, but maybe it's developed more depth since I looked at it last. We can hope so. But to lose the status of the Associated Press, and that works two ways. First of all, you were able to use their content, but second of all, or second, they actually use yours. So you can put it on the AP wire and get, that's assuming you do investigative reporting. And in Tulsa, there's no evidence of that. In fact, I think I made one of their family a little concerned at a neighborhood meeting the other day because I pointed out the story of the Tower View Apartments in downtown Tulsa. Now, this was a very old apartment complex that was on Cheyenne, just a half a block to the north of 3rd Street. And the Tower View had all kinds of problems. It was a crack house. It was a whorehouse. It was a drug den. It had so many. But let me tell you, they did have a pecking order in Tulsa at that place. There was a guy who got kicked out of the day center for the homeless for bad behavior who was able to walk over to the Tower View and actually get a job managing the facility. Gives you an idea of their standard of operations of their management. Now, I lived downtown. I had a loft down there for a while and really enjoyed it, but I would watch every other night or so. There would be an ambulance that would show up in front of the Tower View. And I could never figure out why they were there so often. So I talked to one of the ambulance workers, and he said, yes, it happens. Every time they tell us the same thing. Oh, I don't know what happened. My heart's just palpitating. I just took a little cocaine, and all of a sudden I'm just having trouble. Well, maybe if you didn't do drugs, you wouldn't have problems. But nevertheless, it was the same issue on a regular basis. Now, at the time, this nefarious history of the Tower View apartment was well known to Downtown Tulsa Unlimited, to the mayor's office, to the Chamber of Commerce, to people throughout the community. But the funniest thing was, the other half of the block was a parking lot where the Tulsa World parked for 30 years some odd. So their parking lot was next to a problem and they didn't notice it. That's what they call investigative reporting at the daily newspaper. They didn't notice what was going on in their parking lot. Well, finally they did. And to their credit, they hired a reporter, or assigned one of their reporters, to go into the Tower View apartments and actually report on what was going on inside. And from that point, with evidence, then the fire marshal and public health agency and the city county health department, police, code enforcement, other people were finally able to close the building down. And eventually it burned when some homeless people got inside and decided to light a fire to keep themselves warm. But the fact it went on so long as an obvious nuisance in Tulsa without the daily newspaper noticing it kind of tells you how much investigation they do there. That's kind of why Tulsa Today started in 1996 again. And doing this has enabled the community to have another platform. Now, we can hope the Tulsa World reverses the trend, but it was back in, when was this? It was January of 25 when I sat down with a earlier executive editor of the Tulsa World. And I talked to him about this. I believe worrying about partisanship misses the point. It's not Democrat or Republican. It's left or right. Do people, or does a person believe in top-down authority to build utopia? Using the authority of government to direct people to build a better life? Or is it a better choice to allow freedom as it was established by the Constitution and the originalists that try and maintain it to form, that individual liberty, equal opportunity, not equal outcomes is the purpose? Do you give a person a fish to feed them for a day, or do you teach them how to fish so they can feed themselves for a lifetime? Do you want free stuff or freedom? That's the question between left and right. And of course, the left being communist, which is actually criminal. Communism is simply criminality on a national scale, abusing and killing and doing whatever they do to whoever they want to, because, if you're in charge, you're really powerful in a communist community. And that's kind of what we have in Tulsa. We have a socialist democratic mayor, just like Mandami or Mankami in New York. We have half a nickel Monroe as a socialist democrat in Tulsa. And how did that happen? How, in the reddest of the red states in the Union, when all 77 counties in Oklahoma, an obscene number for such a small state, but anyway, all 77 counties voted for Donald Trump 3 times in a row, every county. And yet, Tulsa elects a socialist democratic mayor. Kind of makes you wonder, how did Tulsa become the biggest brain dead blueberry city in the state? Well, I think you could thank the Tulsa World. And there are some specifics on that we'll talk about in the future. But the question is, back in January of 2025, I met for lunch with Jason Cunningham, who was the executive editor back in the day. And he was very curious about conservatives, and I shared with him and answered whatever questions he might have. But I had a few questions of my own that he did not answer. One of the first ones was, so during the Biden administration, who really was the president? Because it wasn't the serial plagiarist that name was on the door. Who actually ran America during Joe Biden's term? Because it wasn't Joe Biden. You know, he never answered on that question. I'm still looking for an answer on that. You know, his inner circle, they called themselves the Politburo. They said that was a joke. I don't think it was a joke. I think it was humor covering up reality based on the policies they made this country suffer, especially during COVID. Everything Fauci and company and crew said during COVID was an absolute lie. And I think that's going to come out. I hope people are prosecuted nationally for these things. But there's always good news. The most recent good news is that we ended a war started 47 years ago against the United States of America when the Iranian Republic, a misnomer if you've ever seen one, began to kill our people. And they actually invaded the U.S. Media doesn't talk about that, but an embassy is sovereign ground of the country it represents. And Iran let its young people overwhelm and take hostage Americans in the embassy for a long time. They were beaten, they were starved, they were tortured, they were threatened with death repeatedly. And then it was demanded that they go on camera and pretend everything was hunky-dory. Well, that took less than 60 days for the U.S. military to bring Iran to their knees, a place they have some experience with. I'm glad that's over. And you know the war is over here now, May 7th of 2026. You know the war is over when the French arrive with their one and only aircraft carrier. Thank you. Yay, French. Love that. They also, as I understand it, have some used weapons the French will sell. The weapons are lightly used. They've only been dropped once. But nevertheless, we can thank them for finally realizing there was a terror-leading country that had to be stopped. When the Iranian negotiators declared to our official American negotiators they had enough nuclear material to make nuclear bombs within 2 weeks, that's an immediate threat. And every Democrat that tells you different is lying to you. Or maybe they just want their baby children to glow in the dark. I don't know for sure, but it's a fact. You cannot have a death cult, which is what was running Iran, in possession of a nuclear weapon. But that's good news. Or the change is good news. This is what we voted for, a disruptor in chief. And he's doing exactly that by fixing the programs, the problems that 5 other presidents have ignored. And we can celebrate that. This is America's 250th birthday. But you, dear viewer, dear reader, dear interested party, you're going to decide how America communicates best in the coming years. Now, we would ask for your attention on this channel of YouTube, also on the Substack site and on TulsaToday.com. Your comments are welcome. Your email is welcome. We're continually trying to improve our production skills and get better at this. Our producer, Alex, is doing a great job. And we are continuing to build that capacity. Now, I am not going to be the primary voice of this channel. I want to interview other people. I am more interested in their opinions. I know mine. In fact, we've been called vigorous MAGA. But if you talk to the people that I grew up with, they will tell you that I've been MAGA all of my life. I have been conservative before it was named MAGA. What do I want? Liberty, freedom. And actually, for me, it's kind of personal. I want government out of my head, my bed, my pocket, my house, off my block, and if I could send it out of state, I would. But Oklahoma is my greater community. Tulsa is my home. And I invite you to stay up with us, stay in touch with us, give ideas, share with us your ideas on how we can improve and get better. Because our mission is not really anything more than communicating with you. Thank you for watching. Look forward to seeing you again.
Straight